Hi guys, and welcome back to another episode of Daniel's Security Academy. Today we have the question of how can I protect myself and my home network from security threats? And to answer this question, we are going to talk about network security, endpoint security, and smart home considerations. And in the end, I'm gonna try to give you a small summary about everything on what you can do. Let's jump into it with network security. Network security is probably one of my favorite parts, so let's talk about this one first. Protecting your network at home is fairly easy to some extent of security. So the easy things you can do are using modern Wi-Fi encryption like WPA2 or WPA3 with a proper pre-shared key with some complexity in it. And if you provide, for example, an open guest Wi-Fi to friends or guests who are coming to your house, make sure the guest network cannot communicate with your home network. So if you use home grade hardware, you usually have a function of doing a guest Wi-Fi as a separate function. The device itself will usually make sure for you already that this kind of division between your network and the guest network is done. But anything beyond this will require some effort and knowledge, which most home users will not bring to the table, or they don't want to bring the time effort to it. But for the more advanced people here in my audience, here are a few more recommendations on building a safe home network. Use a firewall for outbound traffic, either using maybe a pfSense on a Raspberry Pi or with an actual hardware firewall like Ubiquiti offers. So I personally have the Ubiquiti Dream Machine, I think it's called, which is like a 19-inch rack-sized hardware firewall with some copper ports and some fiber ports, and offers, I believe, like a 1 gig throughput on the security engine. So this is pretty good and is actually fairly priced. But you will also find different vendors and solutions which will offer you a good value. But you can also use a pfSense, for example, as a software firewall on a Raspberry Pi. It is doing also a good job if you want to start small instead of investing a lot of money first. Second thing is segment your network into different security zones. So, for example, devices which you trust and you can control, put into one segment, and, for example, devices you cannot control and you maybe do not really know what they're actually doing, like smart home devices, put them on a different segment. And of course, segment off the guest network if you have a guest network. And you can build more and more segments, but make sure to ask yourself, do I need an additional segment? Do I actually need to segment off my printer from my home computer? It is a good practice to do in enterprises, but for home users, depending on your printer and how much you actually check and regulate your printer, it would probably not call too much, or maybe sometimes won't even call home like smart home devices do. Use a different Wi-Fi for your smart home devices, so a different SSID, and use a different SSID for your personal devices, for example. Because on this way you can actually do all the segmentation also on the Wi-Fi level. So one Wi-Fi goes into the, let's say, smart home VLAN, and the other Wi-Fi goes into your personal network VLAN. So you have a strict division between those two worlds in your network. I can also just highly recommend you, as a tip, use a DNS security solution, like for example OpenDNS, to have some better protection against phishing attacks. With OpenDNS, which is pretty much the consumer grade version of Umbrella, Cisco Umbrella, which is the enterprise grade solution, you will get a lot of protection just by the intelligence Cisco already has about malicious URLs or IPs. So it is definitely not the perfect solution which will cover you from everything, but it's just another layer of security added to your layered security approach. And it doesn't cost you anything because they have a free plan. And it doesn't cost you also performance because the OpenDNS servers are pretty good available. So yeah, there's not really a negative thing to report about the OpenDNS usage. And lastly, a tip I want to give you as well around the DNS part is try to encrypt your DNS traffic with DNS over HTTPS or DNS over TLS. I'm not sure which of those two OpenDNS supports. I believe, to remember correctly, that they support only one of those. But yeah, there are also many more DNS security solutions or providers out there, like for example Cloudflare, which you could use. But yeah, use one of the DNS security solutions over HTTPS or over TLS to encrypt your DNS traffic. And these recommendations will help you to keep a lot of troublemakers outside of your network. Definitely will not keep everyone out of your network, and especially those who are looking after you, who are targeting actually you as a victim. You're probably not going to be able to defend against those, but you will make sure you can protect against the 99% of the regular hackers who just spread phishing and those kind of scans across the internet and see if someone actually gets hit by it. Next part is endpoint security. Probably you will know the most about endpoint security because you've heard about the antivirus solutions. And you were always told, like, okay, buy an antivirus solution to protect your computer. But you will not only need network security to protect yourself at your home, but you will also need the endpoint security. So you need both worlds, especially to make yourself more protected. Most common solution is to have, as I already mentioned, an antivirus software running for the endpoint security. For example, if you run Windows as the operating systems, you can also feel free to just use the Defender, which comes with Windows 10 and Windows 11. Because Microsoft increased the effectiveness of Defender in the past years and is nowadays actually considered to be a good antivirus solution. It may have not all the capabilities other solutions have on the market, but the capabilities it has are considered to be good. And else, go ahead and purchase like any of the antivirus solutions which are on your market from your favorite vendors, if you actually have one. Like, I don't know, McAfee, Symantec, Asset, or one of the many other vendors which are available on the market. Yeah, I cannot name every single one because there's just way too many. Next point is harden your operating system with the onboard capabilities it already brings, because most often those capabilities are not activated by default. For Windows, for example, enable all the security features you can see in the security center, like the core isolation, the ASMR, the memory integrity, and so on. There's so many functions which you can turn on, and some will even need some kind of registry adjustments to, for example, also use cloud intelligence for your protection. But there's also the ransomware protection. And so many features which are not turned on by default, which are very useful to turn on. So go ahead and pause the video here, check what you have enabled actually on your computer, and yeah, if you have some turned off, check if you can actually turn them on, and yeah, protect yourself. You will need, for many of those features, that's why I mentioned check if you actually can turn them on, you will need a TPM module on your mainboard to store certificates or keys onto it. And if you don't have a mainboard with a TPM module on it, yeah, I can only suggest you maybe upgrade your hardware to a mainboard which actually has a TPM module so you can turn on those features. For macOS, you don't really have too many options as a user. Just make sure the security and privacy settings are in a good shape and you have turned on the firewall, and yeah, there's not a lot more you can do to harden the operating system in terms of macOS. A third tip I want to give you for endpoint security is use full disk encryption via, for example, BitLocker for Windows or FileVault on macOS. It won't help you against like a ransomware attack or other active attacks where you currently logged in on your computer and your disk is pretty much decrypted and everything is clear text, but it will help you against theft. So if your laptop maybe gets stolen or you lost it, you just left it behind at a Starbucks, you can be more relaxed because your disk is entirely encrypted, so everything on your disk cannot be read without your interaction, for example, using a password to unlock the BitLocker on boot. For mobile clients like laptops or smartphones, it makes actually really sense to use a VPN or a proxy solution if you are in a public space. So, for example, if you want to do online banking in the public space, if you're sitting at a Starbucks, at a McDonald's, somewhere in open access Wi-Fi, you need to have some security solution in there. Best use case is to use a VPN solution to connect somewhere securely and your packets are decrypted already on your interface level. So use any kind of solutions you want to use. There are so many out there on the market. I personally use the app from Cloudflare. It's 1.1.1.1. And it's just a simple slider where you can turn on the DNS security and also the VPN tunneling, and this will help you for protection. Okay, let's move over to a highly discussed topic, or let's say a hot topic, which is smart home and the considerations you need to do when using smart home devices. As already mentioned, smart home devices such as, like say, smart TVs or the smart kitchen appliances have to be considered differently from your actual devices like your computer or also your printer. You cannot control what they are doing in the background, even less than you can influence what your actual computer or smartphone or whatever printer is doing. So we know smartphones and also Windows 10 or Windows 11 clients doing some telemetry stuff towards Microsoft in the background, which we probably don't want from a privacy reason. But for smart home devices, they even do more, doing data analytics on you and just send data back home, which you maybe really don't want to. So those devices, as I already said, frequently call home to the vendors and transmit data. And a good measure is to shut down the doors just a little for those and only allow them the access they actually need. So if you know your smart TV, for example, uses a specific range of IP addresses for updates, that's okay. And for the other part, you might want to block everything apart from Netflix, Amazon, whatever online services you are using, which you actually want to consume on the TV. I know without like an application control capable firewall, it is difficult to block the traffic which you don't want. But if you have like a layer 7 firewall, you can make it pretty easy of what you will allow from the smart home network to the internet and back again. Smart home devices can be a honeypot for hackers to get access to your network, like it has been proven so many times with, for example, smart cameras or the Mirai botnet. There are so many examples where smart home devices were hijacked and being used as bots because the security implementation on those devices is usually pretty weak. Which is also the reason why many people, especially the security folks, do not trust smart home devices at all, and they ban it from home entirely. But those devices do exist for a reason, because they make something easier or something more convenient. So rather of denying the existence, not the existence, but denying the usage of those smart home devices in general, you probably need to try to cage those devices and just lock them down as much as possible in a secured environment. Only make those devices accessible from the internet, which really need to be accessible, because some smart home devices, for example your TV, really does not need to be available from the internet, because there's no use case, at least I can think of, why I want my TV to be accessible from the internet. But some systems, maybe like lock systems or lighting systems or heating systems, which you actually want to use because you can control light and heat from outside of your home network, of course, those need to be accessible from the internet. So for those, try to lock it down as much as possible, only to the service, the IP address, the port it requires. And yeah, that's pretty much all you can do. So you don't pretty much leave open doors with those devices when they are scanned from a hacker on their usual internet scans they run. Okay, let's talk about summary. Secure the networks as far as you are capable of and willing to put effort into. It is not easy to secure your network entirely and properly, but if you have the time and the knowledge and you want to spend the time, do it. You will increase your security posture drastically if you spend some time. But do not forget that, for example, other users on your network, maybe your wife or your husband, your kids, whoever is, or your guests on the network, they also want to use some services, and it shouldn't be like a hard work for them to access something. They just want to turn on their devices and get to Netflix. So try to be user friendly on the other hand, right? So don't make it too easy, too difficult for those to connect properly. So this is one of the tips I can give you from personal experience. The other part is secure your endpoints with what is available on the market and use the given security features by the operating system. I already mentioned that. Check your security features on your operating system, especially if you're running a Microsoft operating systems like Windows 10 or 11. There are plenty of features available which are not turned on by default. Turn them on as far as possible for you and make use of them. Third, don't trust smart home devices. Guard them and block every unnecessary call or access, but do not deny them entirely from your network, because they have a purpose. There's a reason why they exist on the market, because they make something easier or more convenient for you. So accept those devices, but keep them very secured in your network. And lastly, pretty much a no-brainer, something you will hear many times in all occasions you're going to talk with security folks, is update your devices frequently, as it will make everything safer, because most of the malware is using outdated software which have some known vulnerabilities to it and use this as the backdoor into your network. You can just get rid of this issue if you use patch management or actually update your devices frequently. So do it, it will save you a lot of trouble. Thank you again. That's again the end of today's session. I hope you liked the content. Let me know what you think. As always, let me know what your personal experience is. What have you seen? What is maybe your recommendations on top of mine? Maybe the recommendations I gave, which you want to discuss, which you think it's not correct or not complete. So let me know what you think, and I hope to see you in the next sessions again. Thank you, stay safe, and bye-bye.